All right, so that's what I'm going to be looking at, but you guys need to see my drawing surface. So, and so what I see is pretty similar to that camera view. This. Well, we want to start with sort of a light sort of gesture drawing. And so I might say, okay. And I think you can make your drawing, you know, maybe about, doesn't have to fill your page. It's going to take too long. 5, could be 5 by 7, could be 4 by 6, you know, so it doesn't take you forever. It takes too long to cover the whole page, right? So yeah, 4 by 6 would probably be a decent size, just so that it doesn't take too long to do. That would be okay. So 5 by 7 or 4 by 6, something like that is good. And I think I want the board to go through there. So I'm holding my pencil way at the back. So, and you probably can hardly see lines on here. So if we really zoom in, maybe you can see them. I put a very light line on a very slight angle there. I think I've increased the angle than what's in front of me, but I think I like that. It just looks a little more interesting in the image. And then I'm just going to do a really light drawing. And I'm going to look a little bit at the overlap. I think I got too much surface above. I want to move this up a bit. And I'm looking at how much overlap there is from, I need an eraser. Where did I put my eraser? I don't know. So I'm looking at the overlap of where the pear hits. I kind of want to get a sense of how big do I want the pear on my page. So I'd probably decide on my exact cropping after I've drawn it. I just sort of, so I'm going to just kind of say I want it here. And I'm looking at the overlap between the two pieces of fruit. One's higher than the other. And the apple is smaller than the pear. And I want to make sure I've got room for the cast shadow. So I think I'm going to move this out a bit. Cast shadow comes like that. So I'm just doing a really light rough in, and a kind of just a searching of looking how big is one compared to the other. And so you're using your judgment of kind of looking, how big is this compared to the other thing? What's the overlap you see? So I've planned in, and I haven't really drawn a solid hard outline. It's just lightly roughed in. Do you see that? And then I look at it and say, does that look about right? And we're not trying to be cameras here. We're not trying to say it has to look exactly like the photo. Great if you can do it. If it's different, it's okay, right? This is our first time really drawing observationally, right? So you just do what you can, and it's learning. And what we care more about is that you're really trying to look at the shade and shadow and really understand that, right? So, and be practicing the techniques. So I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think it looks exactly like it, but that's okay. I've got the slight tilt on this pear, and that seems to be there. And then I want to see there's a slight tilt on the apple. Okay, so that's it. So that's what I've got for my drawing. And if we look at what I've been looking at, that's what it looks like, right? Maybe my pear is a little small, but that's okay. Doesn't really matter. All right, so what I'm going to do is start saying I need to rough in my light side and my dark side. I want to sort of set up the major tones. So I might say, okay, it's dark on this half. And I know my highlight is kind of here and there. And so I'm going to try to get that dark half in there. And I'm going to start to establish the shape of the pear by putting in the shadow. So I'm going to use the blue on my shadow. And it's really dark underneath here. And the pear is kind of faceted. It's not really round. And I can see that the shadow looks really dark close to the pear, and it fades slightly as it goes out. So I'm on drawing paper, so you can see that when I'm on drawing paper, my lines don't show as much when I hatch. And I personally like that. Where like Malcolm, who's so awesome at cross hatching, you know, he kind of likes the smooth paper so he can see his stroke. Some people are just awesome at cross hatching. It's not really my bag, but I realize the value of it. It's faster, and that's why we want you to use it. And we don't want you doing this coloring back and forth thing. It doesn't give a good result, right? And some of the other techniques, they're just too time consuming. Designers don't have time for that, you know? So that's why this sort of hatching is really useful. So I should probably set up some of my dark tones. So let's kind of get some of these dark tones. And where I'm showing the pear by the contrast. So there's this cast shadow that falls on the apple. And I'm drawing it with slightly curved lines because the apple is curved. And if I want to darken that up, I can kind of follow the shape of the pear and then just kind of fan it out a bit. Okay, so now I can start to see the pear just because of the two shadows I made, right? And let's kind of rough in the cast shadow of the apple. So the two shadows kind of intersect a little. So I'll just show you what I'm looking at again. You see, those are the shadows that I'm drawing. And so I'm going to rough in this shadow. And it's definitely darkest closest to the apple. And then it kind of fades as it goes away. So I'm kind of pushing a little bit harder on my stroke and then lightening it up as I go back. I really wish I hadn't put that red line there. Maybe I'll crop it off there anyway. I don't know. Okay, so it's kind of a start. I know I'm going to have to darken it up some more too, so I might do a little bit more cross hatching here. Just kind of show that, and then some hatching that follows the shape of the elliptical shadow so it looks smooth. I don't want it to look like I have a cutout burlap shadow. It kind of fades as it goes back, so all right. Okay, so now I'm seeing my shapes already because of the cast shadows a bit, right? Now we see these two pieces of fruit because of the dark background I've placed there, right? So let's put in the dark background around it. And I also have to decide with the pear stem, the pear stem, a lot of it's darker than the background, but there's a highlight on it that's lighter, and the tip of it, right? So that's lighter and that's lighter. But overall, it's dark, and I can see that the background looks slightly lighter, closer to the light source, and then a little bit darker as it goes across. Sometimes, though, in still lifes, I have a pear here, though, that's really light, and I have an apple that's dark. I might not want that to be that dark. I might want to reverse that in my am I drawing just for contrast effect, right? And that would be okay too. So, because where I need the contrast to be the strongest is next to the pear, and I might want to make the apple darker than the background. But I can see when I'm looking at this, I can see that here the apple's darker than the background, but here the apple is lighter than the background. Okay? So you're looking and trying to teach your eyes to see these changes, and then how can you get them to show up on that surface? So part of what we want to do to go around this shape with cross hatching is I follow this curve and then go out past, right? And keep going. I follow this curve and go past, but then go back up here. And then I fan that curve out. So then I don't get that uncomfortable kind of, coloring around the edges kind of thing that doesn't end up looking so good, So I learned that from Malcolm. I thought that would, because I always had a problem with that too. And you know who's really great to look at for hatching and cross hatching? If you look up Albrecht Dürer, wonderful Renaissance artist, late Renaissance artist, German artist, wonderful. His work is amazing. So his etchings, his like black and white drawings and ink drawings are amazing. So if you want to see how to do hatching and cross hatching really well, look at Albrecht Dürer. So your goal in the background is to make it look even by hatching in various directions. We don't want it to look uneven. So the idea of hatching is that because you're going in all directions, eventually it's going to even out. And hatching is very different for everybody. The artist's hand really shows in the way they draw. Some people do it really gutsy and bold, and some people do it really, really fine. And so you can develop your own style, right? So that'll come with practice. So, okay. And so I'm looking, how dark should I make that? Maybe I don't know for sure yet. I find if it's dark, go dark right away. Save yourself some time. Don't, little bit at a time. Lots of people like to start kind of slow and just keep building up the darks, but then it just takes so long. So if you see it's dark, go for it. Just make it dark. You guys are busy, right? And that's the thing we want to show you some shading styles that you could easily start to loosen this up and be able to get quite quick with this cross hatching. Or, a lot of designers don't cross hatch, they just hatch, go in one direction because it's just fast. Because that's generally what we need. We can't take hours to do a drawing, right? It's all about just showing our ideas. Now, in your portfolios, if you're really good at drawing and you love drawing, you might really want to really highlight that and do some really nice shaded still lifes. They're great things in your portfolio. So really need to create some contrast here because the apple is already a medium tone, right? With its color red that absorbs more light. So, I need to be able to show that clearly. So I need to get it pretty dark back here to be able to show that up. And I'm wanting to create these value changes where the background looks looks neat, you know, not like a mess of scribbles, right? And we don't want just like a halo or looks like there's a hole in the wall behind it. You want to kind of even that tone out across. Okay, so now maybe a little uncertain how dark this should go back here, but at least I want to create an overall sort of value back here. And I may decide, I may want to be a little bit tentative here because I got to decide how dark should this be compared to the apple. The apple, I think, has to be darker. So I'm hatching in both sort of two directions here, but I really need to not just do this because I got to follow the form of the apple so I don't get this sort of, you know, rough burlap kind of feel. So I'm going to follow the curve here around. So if you want, you can be drawing along with me, you know, just kind of practicing. We're recording this so that you can follow this when you're doing your own drawing. You're not going to copy me. You're not doing the drawing I'm doing. You're doing your own drawing. We've given you 2 reference images that you could use. You see how I sort of fan out around that curve? And I'm curving the lines and going different directions. So it doesn't look just like, you know, a bunch of it's better to do small angle changes than 90-degree changes. Tends to look nicer. Okay, so that's kind of a medium value for now. That's pretty good. Now what I want to do is set up the value changes on the apple and the pear, especially the apple, because the apple is quite dark, right? And I want to get that set up nice and dark and strong. All right, so I want to get the dark half. So I'm looking at the apple now, kind of trying to say, okay, where's it dark? I can see like there's the top part is catching light, and then it starts getting dark here, and then plus there's that kind of core shadow coming down there. It's really dark in this sort of kind of curved triangle right there, right? And then the bright part is this top here and this part there, and then that's the highlight right there. So let's map out. So it's kind of like, do you remember in 2D design when you did that, the 3 values with hatching of the dog? Do you remember that exercise? It's kind of like that. We want to find those major value changes right now, and it's just like hatching in the dark spots. And kind of looking, where does it look dark? How dark does it look? Well, it looks a lot darker. So I've sharpened my pencil. I want the apple to look crisp, right? This is a shiny, hard fruit. So I want to have a sharp pencil. I don't want fuzzy edges. And I'm not going to draw an outline. I'm shading with my lines up to that edge, right? And then there's this, and I'm following the curve of the apple. So I want to try to get that core shadow shape in there. Kind of like that. And there's some reflected light there. I'm going to try to get some of the darkest part in. So I can establish that dark tone. I'm still going to build it up though. So that's kind of my core shadow. And then I'm going to get the dark half in a bit. I do see a little bit of reflected light here that I got to be careful to stay around. And I'm going to put a bit of a dark half here. I don't ever want my reflected light to be too bright. Still the shade side of the object. Okay, that's not bad. All right, now we want to look, okay, we got this cast shadow from the pear hitting the apple, plus the apple isn't really getting much light on it there. So I'm going to start shading this part of the dark. It'd be nice if I could have two camera angles on Blackboard, but I can't. Any of you do any video recording or anything, or like I prefer OBS because you can do as many camera angles as you want to set up. It would be ideal, wouldn't it, if we could see both when I'm drawing and my image. Okay, so it gets really light in here. I'm gonna switch to red really soon to get some of my lighter values. I just want to establish some of the darks here first. And I think I'm going to switch to red really soon here. So for the apple, I think that's a good, pretty good start. Looks like my apple's a bit skinny, but so that's what I'm looking at. My apple looks skinny. Yeah. Let's add some little bit more round to this apple. All right, let's establish some darks on the pear. So the pear is kind of a combo of a cylinder and a sphere, right? And a cone all in one. It's a compound form, isn't it? So putting in some of the dark. Now the pear is a light greenish yellow, and so it reflects more light, right? And it's really picking up a lot of reflected light off of the table surface. So where red absorbs a lot of the light rays and it looks darker. Yellow reflects a lot of light back, so it looks lighter. Now there is reflected light here, but I don't want to leave that white halo there. I have to put some tone there. Now what we've done with the images of the tomatoes and peppers and onions is we've converted them to black and white for you. So it's the camera, you know, and the editing is already converted it to black and white for you. And that makes it a lot easier, so that if you're going to be looking at, it's nice to do it from life, but you have to be able to sort of see those value differences, because some colors definitely absorb more light than others. So we want to build up that core shadow. And then I'm going to start building in some darks around here. And then I'm going to get, basically the stem is a cylinder, right? I think I made it too skinny. But I think the red will help me define that a bit. Okay, so I'm going to change now to the red. Okay, so let's see. So there's a highlight there and there, so I'm going to need to put some light shading. And now pears are kind of faceted, and you'll find that with a lot of the fruits and vegetables, they're not just smooth, round. You know, like we've got images of, and that's one reason why I included some of the shade and shadow of the apples and pears in the slideshow to help you out, because they're not just flat, smooth, round things like some of the theory images I've put in the slideshow for you guys, right? They're they got kind of facets to them. So sometimes with cross hatching, you can use the stroke to follow the angle of the facet of what plane that part of the fruit is sort of angled at, right? Now, as you're cross hatching, you can push harder where it's dark, push lighter where it's lighter, more lines, more layers where it's dark, right? You can have more open spaces between your hatch marks in the highlight side. You got a question? What's the question? Should we make drawing be in a piece of paper, or do we use a big paper from the kit? You can use the big paper from the kit, but you know, you're not going to be making it massive. You'd use maybe a half sheet of it, right? So, you know, because basically that pad is about twice the size of the one I'm on now, right? So I'm saying we want an image that's about 4 inches by 6 inches. Largest you'd want to make it is 5 inches by 7 inches. Okay. Just because it'll be way too time consuming to do it bigger, right? Because you can see pencil shading is kind of slow. Probably realize that in 2D design with some of the assignments, right? Pretty slow going. So part of what I'm doing here, you see when I want a light tone, I'm holding my pencil way back here. So is it okay to use an ordinary piece of paper? Yeah, you can use print paper. You can use this drawing pad I'm using. I think this was in your kit. You can use the multimedia paper in your kit. If you have a sketchbook, it really doesn't matter. Like I said, if you're using the print paper, it shows your stroke more. And if you really like cross hatching, you like seeing the strokes a lot, you might really enjoy using print paper. I like seeing kind of the texture of the paper personally. So it's a bit of a personal choice, or just what you have available to you, right? So. So right now I've been drawing for half an hour and I'm not done yet. So I think it probably will take you guys about an hour to do this drawing. Maybe longer because you've got to maybe look and watch the video again. You got to look at Pinterest, or you know, look through the slides to remind yourselves. So it might take you a little longer. You might want to plan on 2 hours to get this drawing done. You're welcome to make adjustments to your drawing A if you want to and have it upgraded. Now, one thing I noticed with the new Blackboard, if you are late on an assignment, it does this automatic 0 thing. I will override that though and mark your work anyway, unless it's more than a week late. Of course, if you have accommodations, you're gonna make arrangements with me, right? To kind of figure out what works for you. So there's the pear fairly well. I think that's decent. I might want to darken up a few things with the blue. Might want to add little bits of blue here and there. I think I need a bit more of a fade on this. Just before the core shadow, there's a bit of a fade that happens. And then I think I can see now that the cast shadow has to be a lot darker. So you're going to have to push harder on that. You really need to show that. I think the background might need to get darker too. All right, so now I've got a bit of a halo behind here. We don't want that. So the apple looks really dark in behind the pear. So I'm going to need to get that really dark back there. So I can draw a line to show it, but then I'm going to shade away from it so that it looks dark, right? And we're drawing on this sort of curved apple surface, so I'm curving my lines a bit. Now the pear is made up of all these little facets, right? So I made little hatchy marks that follow the different sort of planes on the pear. Do you see? Okay, so let's keep going with the apple. So let's look at what I'm looking at there. Right, that's what we got. Now the camera sees the lighting a little bit differently than I do. Right, so it looked like a blinding white highlight on it. So, which that's not what I see. Okay, so let's use some red here and let's start establishing some of the medium values. And it's kind of nice because it's a red piece of fruit. That works. So what you could do with the apple too is it does have some texture. And you can actually draw those texture lines of the skin and use them kind of as hatching lines, right? Now you have to remember that the top of the apple is quite light, but it still has some tone, right? And it goes dark inside there. It's got a really short stem, this apple. It gets kind of bright in here, so I don't want to get that too dark. So try not to be, this is where if you're going to do your own drawing, like you can look at the actual fruit, but also take a photo of it from the exact same point of view that you're drawing it. And and change it to black and white and have that there as a reference to help you figure it out. Or again, just use the photos that Malcolm took that I posted. Again, if you're going to do your own, you have to get it approved before you draw it. So you might want to get that emailed to me as soon as possible. And then from experience of drawing still lifes, don't let them sit around too long before your fruit, gets all like nasty on you. All right, I have to leave this highlight. It's quite light there. It really helps to convert it to black and white photo to kind of see that where is it light and where is it dark. So it's going to be darker at the bottom half and darker on the shade half. So let's see, maybe I'll start doing that fade zone here. So that core shadow, there's always this rapid change right around that core shadow area. And the whole apple is a bit dark, right? Like it just has a bright highlight. So don't be afraid of dark and contrast. So on the shade side, I'm going to push a little harder to save myself some time and just make it nice and dark. I do see some soft highlights. So I'm going to leave a few places just blue and not have the red there. A little bit of highlight there. It's darker on the edge. So I want to establish the tonal changes, right? So that's one of my main concerns. So that just building up the light and dark that I'm seeing. And getting the form first, primarily, and then I'm going to draw stripes of the skin in that as part of my marks too. So it's darker at the bottom. So the light's coming from the top and this way, right? And it fades a bit underneath. It gets a bit darker under here. Darker next to the shadow. There's a little bit of reflected light down here. So I don't want to get that too dark. And then it's super dark on this side of the apple. Okay, and super dark here. So I'm going to put some more layers, push a little harder to get my point in there so there's good definition. And okay, now I'm going to get some extra darks built up with the blue now, another layer, just where I see it's really dark. And the shadow has to get a lot darker, especially underneath it. It's called the occlusion shadow. I'm gonna add, oops, shoot. and the red to the shadow to blacken it up in just a couple of spots where it's really dark. Now, let's see, let's start adding, I'm pushing harder here, I'm going to start adding some of the texture of the apple skin and some of these sort of stripes that I'm seeing. And using it to kind of build up the tone and shape of the apple as well. So now I'm looking for the detail. This is when the detail comes. So form first, detail last. Okay. So with the tomatoes, you'll have to put a fair bit of tone because the tomatoes have really bright highlights on them, very shiny, right? So this needs more tone down here. So you see on the drawing paper, you do see the stroke, but it also kind of blends in after a while, right? It starts to look a little more smooth. Okay. Now, that's not bad, but I think we need more contrast with the background. And I haven't added any red yet, so I think that's what's going to make a difference. So I'm going to look now and say, okay, where do I want it to look a little darker? Maybe just do a bit of a fade as it goes down the wall here. And it definitely looks darker there. So I want to get it darker in behind the pear here. And that's a tricky one sometimes, you know, to say, and just because I see something doesn't mean I have to draw it. I want it to look good on my drawing, right? I'm trying to show that this is brighter than the background. But I have to be careful because I need to be able to see all these tones, right? Now, sometimes if one object appears to be a similar value to the background, that's okay. You can let it be so. You can have some edges that seem to be a bit lost, that don't show up really hard. But most edges you want to show because of contrast of light and shade, right? And if you're adding your red on top of the blue, you're going to interlace it. Don't just go in one direction. Okay. Now, does that add enough contrast? And does it look like a slow fade rather than just like you punched a hole in there in one spot, right? And do slow fades. That's not bad. You see it's starting to make the apple kind of jump off the page more. I think the pear needs a little more work. And I think just by adding more dark in the background, I think it's going to help a lot. So you see, we're drawing by tone as opposed to by outline, right? And try to go in different angles than what the blue is, right? Don't just go exactly over the previous marks. You can kind of get this shimmering kind of effect of overlapping strokes, right? Kind of interlacing. So I'm trying to get it dark near here, but to slowly fade away across this surface here. Now, my fruits are very shiny, crisp edges. There's a lot of light hitting the edges of them. I want to make sure that I sharpen my pencil when I come up close to the edge of the objects so that I don't have a fuzzy edge. You know, it's different, Amy, if you were drawing something that's very fuzzy, but we don't want our fruit to be fuzzy, or maybe it's gone moldy. So sharpen your pencil when you're coming up to those edges. And even if you draw a line that goes around, you've got to make that line look as if it's part of the shading. It's part of the hatch lines. It shouldn't appear like an outline, okay? So that's kind of making that pear look more crisp, but I've got a bit of a, looks like there's a hole there. So I got to fade that away, right? And make that more of a plane in the background. Not looking like it's, you know, a hole that's dented. So now that's really dark there and it's suddenly blue compared, so I got to bring this across. And then I think what I'll do is I'll just sort of let that fade this way. So it's nice and dark behind the pear and the apple. And then slightly fading, just so that it's maybe more interesting than just a flat plane that's all the same tone. And then also it helps for if this is a little less dark, because it helps that red dark apple stand off the background. So I'm not pushing as hard, I'm not putting as many layers. So what you do if you're doing a long stroke like this, you push at the line, at the beginning of the line, and then you pull up and speed up as you go across. That's not too bad. I think I could maybe make the shadows a little stronger, but pretty happy with that. And then I might want to do a little bit of just a few details, like there's these like marks on my pear, you know, little blemishes on the skin. There's a few lumps and bumps to the skin. So then I'm going to come and maybe do a bit of texturing. And this is part of what you learned in the, what do you call it? 2D design, right? Where you did the texture shading. So now maybe I want to put a few marks, make it look like a pear. You could even add a bit of stippling if I want. Just go around, give it a little bit of detail. And you might give the apple a little more texture detail if you want. You don't have to do this stage. We're more looking for the cross-hatching, right, and the tonal changes. But if you wanted to, you can put a little more detail. Show a little bit of the texture. And you've learned how to do that. So you might want to go back and kind of review what did you learn in 2D design when you were learning about texture shading, right? All right, do you think my pear and apple look round now? Then we might want to just finish this off here a bit, give that a bit of more grounding. You might want to do just a slight bit of tone just on that surface. It's darker on one side and lighter on the other. So what you can see here, I'm holding my pencil back far. I'm just doing light strokes, so it's not too much, right? Then we'll just leave it white, I think. So there. Now, it's up to you how you want to finish that off. Maybe neaten up the edge of it a bit, right? And you can use your own sort of styling to this. Unfortunate little blemish there. I guess I should erase that. There. So there's my drawing. All right. So the main thing is that you get form. That's what we're really interested in, that you can show us the form, right? And light half, dark half.